I am 70 years old. That is 7 decades of living, working, failing, learning, and slowly figuring out what truly matters. If you are watching this, I want to speak to you, not as an expert, but as someone who has walked the road ahead. Over the years, I made plenty of financial mistakes, but the biggest lessons I learned were never really about making more money. They were about living with more peace. In this video, I will not be talking about how to chase wealth or time the stock market. I will share the quiet, powerful truths I wish someone had told me when I was 50 or even 60. Because the kind of retirement that brings real security and joy has little to do with numbers in a bank account. It starts with changing how we think. And for many of us, especially in America, that shift is urgent. Too many older adults today are unprepared. Some rely on their children. Others feel trapped by rising costs and shrinking savings. I want to help change that. Let us talk honestly about money, about aging, and about building a life that feels truly rich. 1. The Great Unlearning: How I Simplified My Life and My Budget. Retirement is often painted as a finish line, a reward at the end of decades of hard work. But the truth is, for me, it felt more like a reset. I was not just leaving a job. I was leaving behind a way of life that had shaped me for over 40 years. That meant unlearning a lot. Unlearning the habits of spending, accumulating, and constantly doing. And in that unlearning, I found something I never expected: freedom. Let me take you back to the first thing I tackled. It was not my finances. It was my closet. For decades, I had worked in offices that demanded suits, ties, polished shoes, the whole uniform of professionalism. I owned enough business attire to clothe a small conference. But one morning, a few months into retirement, I opened the closet and realized I no longer needed any of it. I was not dressing to impress anymore. I was not heading to meetings. So I asked myself, why am I still living like I am? That day, I started shopping my own closet. I found shirts I had forgotten about, jeans I loved, but had tucked away. I stopped buying new clothes, except when I truly needed something. And when I did, I turned to thrift shops and secondhand stores. I found high-quality items for a fraction of the price. More importantly, I felt a sense of relief. The pressure to look a certain way had quietly left my life, and along with it, the spending that came with it. The next step was the driveway. My wife and I had always had 2 cars. We both worked, we both commuted. It made sense back then. But in retirement, we were usually together. Most days, one car just sat there, unused, still racking up insurance and maintenance costs. After a few months of going back and forth, we sold the second vehicle. The lump sum from the sale was nice, but the real gift came each month: lower bills, fewer headaches, and one less thing to manage. Our pantry was another lesson. For years, buying in bulk made sense. We were feeding a family. Warehouse stores were a part of our routine. Giant jugs of olive oil, massive bags of rice, crates of canned goods. But now, with just the 2 of us, those same items were expiring before we could finish them. We ended up throwing out food, and with it, throwing away money. Eventually, we let our warehouse club membership go. Now we buy smaller portions at our local market. It feels more personal, more sustainable, and surprisingly, more affordable. Then there was our home. During our working years, weekends were our time to rest. We gladly paid for someone to mow the lawn, clean the house, and fix small things around the property. But retirement gave us something we had not had in years: time. I started doing the lawn myself. My wife and I began deep cleaning the house once a week. At first, it felt like a chore, but then it started to feel like a blessing. We were saving money, yes, but we were also moving our bodies, staying active, and feeling more connected to our space. This process, this great unlearning, was not always easy. It is hard to let go of habits that have been with you for most of your adult life, But here is what I learned. Retirement is not about trying to maintain the lifestyle you had when you were working. It is about redefining what a good life looks like now. And here is the surprising part. The less I owned, the less I needed. The fewer obligations I had, the freer I felt. And the simpler my budget became, the more confident I felt about the future. But cutting obvious expenses, like clothes, cars, and club memberships, was only the beginning. What I did not see coming were the hidden costs, the ones that sneak in quietly as you age, and if you are not careful, they can undo years of careful saving. In the next part of this video, I want to share with you the most surprising financial challenges I faced after turning 70. Not the ones you expect, like groceries or bills, but the ones that catch you off guard. Because if we want to protect what we have worked so hard to build, we need to prepare for what we cannot see coming. So stay with me, because the next lesson might be the one that saves your retirement. 2. The stealth costs. Navigating the financial surprises of later life. When most people think about retirement expenses, they imagine things like groceries, utility bills, or maybe a vacation here and there. And yes, those are real. But in my experience, the biggest threats to your financial peace are not the predictable costs. They are the quiet, creeping ones. The ones you do not see coming until it is too late. I call them the stealth costs of retirement. And trust me, they can drain your savings faster than you ever imagined. Let me start with the biggest one of all. Healthcare. Now, most of us have heard that medical care is expensive. That is not news. But even with Medicare, which, by the way, is a godsend, you are still left with major gaps. The biggest shock came when my wife and I sat down to research long-term care. We knew we were getting older. We wanted to be prepared. What we found stunned us. The average cost for a single year in a skilled nursing facility is over $125,000, and that number is rising by about 5% every year. 5% may not sound like much, but over 10 years, that adds up quickly. Statistically, men will need around 2.2 years of long-term care, and women will need about 3.7 years. Multiply that by those annual costs, and suddenly, you are looking at a six-figure expense that could wipe out a large portion of your retirement savings. We had to rethink everything. Long-term care insurance? Maybe. Downsizing? Possibly. But the key takeaway was this: you cannot just hope you will stay healthy. You need a plan in place financially and emotionally for when things change, because eventually they will. Then there is the home you live in. For many of us, our homes hold our memories, our comfort, our identity. But they are not always built for the changes that come with aging. I remember one afternoon when I slipped slightly on the stairs. Not a fall, just a scare. It was enough to make me realize this house I love might not always love me back. So we started making small but important changes. We installed grab bars in the bathroom. We replaced one tub with a walk-in shower. We even began saving for bigger adjustments down the line, maybe a stair lift or even a ramp. These changes are not just about safety. They are about freedom. They allow us to stay in our home on our terms for as long as possible. And that kind of independence, it is worth every dollar. Another silent threat in retirement is inflation. Now, when I was working, I barely noticed it. A few cents more for milk, maybe a higher cable bill, it did not feel like a big deal. But when you are living on a fixed income, every price increase feels personal, especially when it comes to healthcare and prescriptions. Since the year 2000, healthcare costs have risen about 40% faster than the general cost of living. That is not just frustrating, it is dangerous for retirees who have to choose between medication and groceries. And speaking of prices creeping up, here is one that caught me completely off guard: car insurance. I thought the older I got, the cheaper it would be. And that was true, for a while. But then I hit 60, and slowly, my premiums started to rise again. The industry sees older drivers as higher risk. From age 60 to 75, your rates can increase by 10 to 20%. It is not a budget breaker by itself, but add that to higher medical costs, home maintenance, and inflation, and suddenly the math starts to feel tight. What all of this taught me is simple. Retirement is not the time to be passive. It is the time to be proactive. You cannot just focus on the big, obvious expenses. You have to dig deeper and look at the ones that sneak up on you. I want to be clear. I am not saying all of this to scare you. I am saying it to prepare you. Because when you are prepared, you are empowered. You can make thoughtful decisions. You can build a safety net. You can protect your peace. Now, if you are feeling overwhelmed, take a breath. You are not alone. Most of us were never taught how to prepare for these hidden costs. But the good news is, there is a way forward. It is not flashy. It is not fast, but it is powerful. In the next part of this video, I will share the financial habits that brought me the most peace. Habits built not on luck or high income, but on patience, consistency, and values. If you have ever felt like your retirement plan was not enough, or that it was too late to change, I promise you, it is not. The next few minutes may shift your entire mindset. Let us keep going. 3. My boring path to financial peace. Let me tell you something that may surprise you. The most important financial decisions I ever made were not flashy, brilliant, or quick. In fact, they were kind of boring. No secret formulas, no sudden windfalls, just a lifetime of doing the small, steady things that added up over time. And while they might not make headlines, they gave me something that is far more valuable than excitement. They gave me peace. Let me explain. I never had a big inheritance. I never sold a business for millions of dollars. I worked an ordinary job, earned an average salary, and paid my bills like everyone else. But somewhere along the way, probably in my late 30s, I started to understand something. Financial peace is not about how much money you make. It is about how consistent you are with what you do have. I call it playing the long game. The long game means living below your means even when you get a raise. It means skipping the impulse buys and asking yourself, will this really matter 5 years from now? It means investing regularly, month after month, no matter what the market is doing. I remember setting up automatic contributions to a retirement account in my early 40s. It was not much, maybe $100 or $200 a month, but I never stopped. Through the ups and downs, I just kept going. And those little investments, they grew. Slowly at first, then steadily, then significantly. It is like planting a tree. You do not see much at the beginning, but you water it anyway. You give it time. And one day you wake up and realize you are sitting in the shade of something that has been growing quietly for decades. That same philosophy shaped the way I invested. I watched friends and coworkers jump into whatever was hot, .com stocks, cryptocurrencies, flipping houses. Some of them made quick money. Some lost everything. I decided early on that I would rather be safe than sorry. My strategy was simple. Stick to broad, diversified index funds and some real estate. That was it. I did not chase trends. I did not try to time the market. I just stayed the course. Now, was it exciting? No. But it let me sleep at night. I never lay awake wondering if I was about to lose half my savings. I knew my investments would not double overnight, but I also knew they would not crash overnight either. That kind of stability is underrated, especially when you are older and you cannot afford to start over. But it is not just about investing. The real secret, if you want to call it that, is in the daily choices. The small, often invisible decisions we make every day that add up to something meaningful over time. For example, my wife and I rarely ate out. We enjoyed cooking at home. It was healthier, cheaper, and frankly, more enjoyable. We packed lunches, brewed our own coffee, and treated restaurant dinners as a special occasion. not a routine. Over time, those savings added up, not just financially, but in health and connection. When we went into the city for an outing, a museum, a concert, or a dinner, we used public transportation. We always asked for senior discounts, and you would be amazed how many places offer them, from grocery stores to movie theaters to hotels. Sometimes the savings were small, maybe a few dollars, but they added up. More importantly, they reminded us that being older has its advantages too. Another habit we developed was doing regular money check-ins. Every month, we would sit down with a cup of coffee and go over our spending, not to punish ourselves, but to stay aware. Where was our money going? Were there things we could cut without missing them? These little meetings became part of our rhythm. They gave us clarity, and with clarity came confidence. Here is the truth. You do not need to be rich to feel secure. You just need to be intentional. The calm I feel today did not come from one big moment. It came from hundreds of small decisions, made with care, made with purpose. And if you are listening to this thinking, I wish I had started earlier, let me gently say this. It is never too late to start doing the right thing. Whether you are 55, 65, or 75, you can still create new habits. You can still make choices today that your future self will thank you for. Now, up to this point, we have talked about money, how to spend it, save it, and protect it. But there is another challenge that has nothing to do with dollars and cents and everything to do with the people we love. Because sometimes, the hardest part of retirement is not managing your finances. It is setting healthy boundaries with family. In the next part of this video, I will share some of the most difficult conversations I have ever had and why learning to say no with love might be one of the greatest financial skills you will ever need. 4. The hardest conversations, drawing financial boundaries with family. Managing money in retirement is one thing. Managing your relationships around money, that is a whole different challenge. And for many of us, it starts right at home, with our children and grandchildren. Now let me be clear. I love my family deeply. I would give almost anything to see them safe, happy, and secure. But over time, I realized that constantly saying yes was not love. It was enabling. And when I finally learned to say no with kindness and honesty, I did not just protect my retirement. I gave my family a gift they never expected: responsibility. Let me tell you a personal story. After our kids left home, we kept them on our family cell phone plan. At first, it made sense. It was cheaper, easier, and honestly, we just did not think about it. But years went by, and nothing changed. We were still paying over $200 a month for a 4-line plan. That is more than $2,000 a year for adult children who were fully capable of paying their own bills. I saw a survey once that said over 1/3 of millennials are still on their parents' phone plans. It made me pause. Were we helping our kids, or were we holding them back? Were we being generous, or were we afraid of conflict? So one day, my wife and I sat them down. We explained that in 3 months, they would need to move to their own service plans. We offered to help them shop around and compare deals. But we were clear. This was their responsibility now. It was not an easy conversation, but it was necessary. And you know what? They handled it better than we expected. In fact, I think they respected us more for setting a boundary. But not every conversation goes that smoothly. Sometimes the requests are bigger: a loan to cover rent, help with a down payment, support during a divorce. And in those moments, saying no feels like saying, I do not care. But that is not the truth. The truth is, you can care deeply and still protect what you have built. Over the years, I have learned a few phrases that help. If you struggle with setting boundaries, maybe these will help you too. The first is, I need to talk it over with my spouse. Even if you already know the answer is no, this gives you space. It shifts the decision from just you to a shared conversation. It also shows your loved one that you take the request seriously, but that you are part of a team and financial decisions are made together. The second is, things are tight right now. This is an honest and respectful way to explain your situation without going into details. Retirement often means living on a fixed income, and that income has to last, not just for months, but for decades. Framing it that way helps others understand that your resources are limited for a reason. The third is, most of our money is tied up in long-term savings, and that is true for many of us. Retirement funds are not meant to be liquid. Taking money out early comes with penalties and consequences. By explaining that your funds are not easily accessible, you set a boundary without sounding harsh. Now, does this mean you can never help your family financially? Of course not. But help should be intentional. It should fit within your budget. And it should come from a place of strength, not obligation. If you do choose to help, I recommend one thing: set clear terms. If it is a gift, say so. If it is a loan, write it down. Set a repayment plan. That might feel uncomfortable, but trust me, it will prevent far more discomfort later. Here is something else I have learned. When you set financial boundaries, you are not closing the door on your relationships. You are opening the door to deeper honesty. You are treating your loved ones as capable adults. And that is one of the greatest expressions of respect there is. Because here is the hard truth. Your retirement nest egg is not just yours. It is also your future. It is your health care, your housing, your peace of mind. If you give it away too easily, you may find yourself in need later, and the very people you tried to protect might not be in a position to help you. I say all of this with love. We grew up in a generation that believes in sacrifice, and that is beautiful. But retirement is not the time to sacrifice your stability for someone else's comfort, especially when other options exist. Setting boundaries is not selfish. It is wise. And wisdom is something our generation has plenty of. Now, having said all that, let me ask you this. What is the point of all this saving, planning, and protecting if we do not use our money for what truly matters? In the next and final section, I want to talk about that deeper purpose. Not just how to manage your money, but how to let your money serve a life that feels joyful, meaningful, and free. 5. The real return on investment. What money is actually for. After a lifetime of earning, saving, budgeting, and investing, you start to see money differently. In your working years, money can feel like the goal, something to chase, something to build. But when you retire, you realize something deeper. Money is not the goal. It is the tool to build a life worth living. Let me say this clearly. Your purpose in retirement is not to die with the biggest bank account. Your purpose is to live these years with as much health, joy, meaning, and connection as you possibly can. And that is what I call the real return on investment. Let us start with the foundation of everything, your health. When I was younger, I thought of exercise as something I should do. Now I think of it as something I get to do. Because every walk around the block, every stretch, every healthy meal, it is not just about feeling better today. It is an investment in my future self. The fewer pills I have to take, the more I can enjoy life. The stronger my legs are, the longer I can avoid needing help. That freedom, it is priceless. I used to see spending on fresh food or a gym membership as optional. Now I see it as preventive medicine. I would rather pay for blueberries and walking shoes today than hospital bills and wheelchairs tomorrow. And then there is something just as important, maybe even more important than health. It is purpose. When you stop working, you do not just lose a paycheck. You can lose a part of your identity. That daily structure, that sense of being needed, it can vanish overnight. And if you are not careful, you can drift into a kind of quiet sadness. I have seen it happen. I have felt it myself. That is why I believe every retiree needs what I call a purpose portfolio. What goes into it? That is up to you. For me, it is mentoring a younger person in my former line of work. It is volunteering once a week at the local library. It is finally taking time to learn photography, something I always wanted to do, but never made time for. These things do not pay money, but they give me something better: meaning. You see, purpose is what gets you out of bed in the morning with a sense of direction. It reminds you that you still have something to give, something to offer, something that matters. And then, finally, there is the greatest investment of all: people. I will never forget something I read from the Harvard study of adult development. It is one of the longest studies on human happiness ever conducted. After more than 75 years of research, they came to a simple conclusion: good relationships keep us healthier and happier. Period. Not money, not status, not how many degrees you earned or how many countries you visited. What matters most is connection. So these days, I invest in connection just like I would invest in a retirement fund. I call friends and check in. I plan a weekly lunch with a neighbor. My wife and I host a monthly game night. Not fancy, just a few people, some snacks, and a lot of laughter. We make time for family video calls even when everyone is busy. We write real letters to old friends, and we say yes to invitations more often. Because the return on that kind of investment is joy, and you feel it instantly. Here is the truth: money gives you options, but love, purpose, and health give you life. I do not want to look back on these years and say, well, at least I was financially stable. I want to say, I used my money to live, to grow, to connect, to feel, to matter. So wherever you are in your retirement journey, whether you feel secure or uncertain, I hope you will ask yourself this: what is all this planning for? What is the end goal? Because once your basic needs are met, money should do more than sit in an account. It should support a life that feels full. And that life looks different for everyone. For some, it is travel. For others, it is staying close to home, planting a garden, or raising a grandchild. There is no single right way to spend this chapter. But there is a wrong way: letting fear or guilt keep you from enjoying what you have earned. These years are not just about surviving, they are about thriving in the ways that matter most to you. In just a moment, I will share my closing thoughts and one question I hope you will answer in the comments. But for now, let me leave you with this: you spent decades working hard. You have earned the right to live softly, wisely, and meaningfully. Let your money support the life you were meant to live, not the one the world tells you to chase.